Yes, 800-8949, 800-8949. If you have questions today about anything we've discussed, we're going to look now at one of my favorite topics, and that is local economy as an economy, the investment economy, the investment world in the Chattanooga area. And Chattanooga has some boutique investment houses, and they get a lot of press. But I'm afraid there's not really enough here. There's not really enough investment life in Chattanooga. There could be triple or quadruple the amount if we just had other things in the economy differ. But we're glad to have what we have nonetheless. In what surrounded as I suggest we are by a kind of plantation and neo-feudal national economy full of debt. It's bulging to the gills with debt, and there are tough times ahead, I suggest. But that should not put a damper on local investment. And in fact, if we have more local-centric investing, we will have better prospects as a city overall of coming out with less damage to our individual net worth. Stephanie Crowe is a co-founder and a general partner of Jump Fund here in Chattanooga, which had in its first round of raising capital $2.5 million that went out from almost all original investors. And the investees, those who received the money to make their projects go, were women. And now, again, in the second round of capital raising with a goal of $3 million, there is, again, women businesses that need capital to expand and to get their bearings. And women and men are being invited to take part in that. And Stephanie, how is it that you've come into managing this group that doesn't have a payroll? No one gets paid a regular salary. A group of women who are rewarded periodically by gains in those women-run businesses in which Jump Fund invests. How did you get involved in this
Sure,
effort?
David. And thanks for having me on the show. When you said a favorite topic, I thought that was women. I didn't realize that was the local economy, but we're here to talk about both. And I want to clarify that we do have a managing partner, Christina Montague, who gave up her full-time job at the business school of UTC to focus on this full-time. So we're so incredibly grateful for her. The rest of the general partners put a lot of time in, but we all have other jobs and families. So this is really, I'd say, a project of passion and purpose. And a little over 4 years ago, we showed up at the first Gig Tank competition, an amazing event, tremendous companies pitching for prizes and capital, and we just didn't see any women on the scene. And with hundreds of people, jumping in on this, obviously a huge amount of traction in Chattanooga, we were so disheartened. We didn't know where the women were. And so we got together, a small group got together to say, where's the problem? Why aren't women showing up for this? This is like high potential. This is about innovation. This is about Chattanooga's future. And we debated offering some more programming, raising money, through charity to underwrite, again, more programming. And I think it was Tiffany Robinson who said, we need to pull together capital. If we have capital, we'll find the business ideas, we'll find the women. So it was very much a startup endeavor because we just had instincts. We saw an underserved area. We saw a pain point where women were not receiving capital at the same rate of men. They weren't even at this phenomenal event that Chattanooga was so excited about. So we thought maybe we'll raise $1 million. And the really exciting thing was, over the course of less than a year, we ended up raising $2.5 million, strictly from women, 98% of which lived in Chattanooga. So when we talk to our friends throughout the state, including Charlie Brock, who's CEO of Launch, a state-focused economic development startup entity, I think he was one of our first champions to say that this is phenomenal that a small group of Chattanooga women could get so much traction so soon. And the really interesting thing was, not just did we raise the capital, but very quickly thereafter, we started seeing tremendous deals and very quickly deployed the first portfolio.
Well, tell us, Stephanie Crowe, who were the recipients, or who were among the recipients of that first wad of cash?
One of our very first rock stars, folks will know of, is Feetz. Started by Lucy Beard, Feetz. And we'd like to say that we helped launch Lucy. She's a rock star and she's on to amazing things, but we were I think her very first investment group that said, we see your potential and we want to get behind you. She quickly gained traction, and she since has relocated to the West Coast, but we're still engaged as an investor. She's got some amazing strategic partnerships with nationally known names. She left Chattanooga to access a talent pool she just didn't have here. And also there was a major investor on the West Coast that she followed. But we're still very close to her. We have a representative on our board. There's a handful of other companies. We actually had an exit.
Well, hold on just a second. Stephanie, what is Feats about? What is the main product?
Feats is 3D printed shoes, which was really a novel concept. And so what you wouldn't realize is people don't have the same size shoes, like or feet. Like a ton of people have foot issues. And so Feats came out not just with a really interesting way to design beautiful, funky shoes, but also solving a real pain point for the consumer that might have, feet that are not, like, they just can't find shoes that work for them on the market. So Lucy's doing some really, really fun stuff. The other interesting thing with her company is she's saving water as a resource, and the material usage is so much more efficient. So you wouldn't think this, but she's a design play, a fashion play, solving for people's feet issues, and she's also like helping the environment with her manufacturing.
And who else was in the first group?
Oh my gosh, you'd have to talk to the founder, but typically the Jump Fund as a small player can't solve for all the capital needs of these companies. And so part of our work is not just allocating our own investment, but to help open doors and garner conversations so that these founders have more friends at the party.
Well, who else was at the table? I guess is my question. You had Feats. You said there were other
investors.
Recipients of capital.
Sure, of course. So there's a wonderful company we recently jumped on board with, Utilize Health, out of Nashville. This rock star actually had a gymnastic injury. Was told by the medical community she would never walk again. If you saw her today, she looks like she could leap tall buildings. This is a woman you just want to bet on. I mean, if this woman was told she's never walked again, and like to see what she's onto, the power of just sheer will and determination, I say this woman is going to be, doing some wonderful things. Another good friend of ours that we were helping years before we actually made an investment is Courtney Jones of MomSource Network, based in Knoxville. Courtney was helping friends who are at home but professional and educated find part-time work or flexible work arrangements. And she just helped them just because it was, of interest to her, and she had connections, and she realized this was probably a business opportunity for her. And now she's definitely a regional player, and I think very quickly will become a national player. This
is David Tulis. Thanks for joining us. We're here at Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and FM 92.7, live on Facebook. You can go to the Nooga Radio Facebook page. Also live on YouTube at Hot News Talk Radio. Well, Stephanie, the question my listener wants me to ask is this. Okay, so Feats got part of $2.5 million, Utilize Health and Courtney Jones at MomSource and maybe others. Mm-hmm. What is your expectation? Are these loans? Are these investment? What's the difference between investing in a business and lending money? How is that the dynamic different, and where is risk apportioned?
Sure. So when we talk to our female founders, gosh, if they can get a loan, that's always a better place. If you have a high growth venture, keep your equity, own your company, don't take on investors. Frankly, sometimes the wrong investor can be a bigger, thorn in your side than actually an aid. So I like to coach women. If you're growing a Main Street business and you can work off a loan, do that and preserve your equity. The Jump Fund is an equity fund and an angel fund. So we're very, very early. We typically want to see some revenues and some traction, but these companies are not yet making money. But where it makes sense is by pulling on an equity investor, they're able to move faster, they're able to scale faster. And so it's almost like they're taking on investors, but their pie is going to be so much bigger, and we want to be part of that picture.
And the risk the owner has in his or her mind is, wow, if I take this money from Jump Fund, they're going to own some statutory portion of my business, mm-hmm. and that's of course if it increases in value, that's a benefit to the investors and the Jump Fund. But if it declines in value, well, they're sharing the risk. They may share a loss too, or a long term without reward. And are you willing to wait a long time for reward, Stephanie Crowe?
So the angel, I'm glad you asked that, because the angel is a very specialized place. I've got 20 years of wealth and investment management behind me. looking at asset allocation and diversification. The angel investment, especially for a private fund, is for accredited investors who can tie up their money for 5, 7, possibly 10 years. You're investing in companies that are growing fast, but your payback really comes when those companies exit, when they facilitate a sale. So Lucy Beard and Feats, we're really hoping that one of her strategic partners decides to buy her for a wonderful price within the next few years. That's when you get paid back as an angel investor. So it's higher risk. There's ways to approach that risk and to think about it, and I can tell you more about how we do that. But you really only want to allocate a portion of your overall net worth into this space because you're working with small companies. They're not assured to be successful, and it's usually a longer period. It could be 3 years, but that's really unusual to grow a company and sell it within 3 years.
Well, let's just back up just for a second, Stephanie Crowe. What qualifies a person to be a qualified investor? What is your net worth requirement and income requirement?
Yeah, so Google this because I want to be sure I have it right. But there's a family income threshold. There's an individual income threshold. There's a net worth requirement of $1 million outside of the equity in your house. What the statute is about is making sure that sophisticated, experienced investors are getting involved because there are risks around liquidity and performance.
So you're saying federal statute effectively keeps my small investor listener out of investing in this field. He can't with $100,000, $200,000, which to some people sounds like a lot of money, but which is a tiny amount. So he can't invest because of federal statute.
Well, let me build upon that because there's a new space coming forth, crowdfunding or crowdsourcing, and that is for smaller dollars. There are platforms that take this money, and you can actually get behind a small company through crowdsourcing without hitting those specifications. But if you want to play in an angel capital fund or a venture capital fund, then you do have to meet those requirements.
So in other words, you have to have enough padding, financial padding, that you can take a loss and not be at the poorhouse. Because
typically your commitment is pretty significant. So these funds don't just take,
the commitment would be what?
To the fund.
500,000 to 900,000.
Now the jump fund is a smaller fund, so we're taking a lesser amount, but in the space, typically you've got to say $250,000 as an individual. The jump fund's not there, but if you're looking at angel and venture, they're looking for bigger investors to commit a bigger sum of money to really move the dial and make it a meaningful return. The jump fund's a little bit of a niche in that we're grassroots, we're a smaller player, and we're focused on the economic impact. If that makes sense.
That does make sense, but I'm still thinking about work in the future. Chattanooga needs to have a local-centric crowdsourcing platform that gets the smaller investor, and I'm thinking even here of women investors who think of a woman's worked in let's say she worked at Cigna much of her life. She's divorced, her children are grown, and she has a nest egg. She has Social Security coming. Let's say she's 60. And she has $100,000. She doesn't have a lot of padding. She pays rent on an apartment. Mm-hmm. She can afford that with her employment. And here she can't invest. She would like to invest in women. She's sympathetic with women. Her daughter is in your field. Let's just say, and
solution.
So she can't do anything because of these rules. What's the future?
The future is emerging. So it's so exciting because this is a space not just going to be relegated to sophisticated, big institutional styled investors. There's a lot of really neat things happening. And I would say my friend Marco Perez at Launch is absolutely on this beat. He's been working with a platform called Kiva, KIVA.com, which is a kind of a micro lending platform to allow the small business player to access capital and for investors at a smaller level to actually lend money at really, really great rates. There are other platforms out there that aren't loans, but on the equity side, and I've heard of some small companies using that to raise $20,000 and kind of gain friends and fans. I do want to mention something that was really interesting. I had a conversation with friends at Tennessee Valley Federal Credit Union, and they've developed a very unusual loan fund that is out of the box from the way bankers conventionally write loans. You access this by running through programs through Tennessee Small Business Development Center, the Bright Bridge Women's Development Center. You go through their programs, and for certain businesses that qualify, and frankly, the credit union folks say that a lot of women are coming through and qualifying, is then access to capital, which might be 30, 50,000, 60,000. So just enough to get up and out the door. And I love to see traditional financial institutions thinking creatively, thinking outside the box to solve for Main Street company needs.
Well, you're talking, when you mention financial institutions such as the Tennessee Valley Federal Credit Union, you're talking about fractional reserve lenders. You're not, your capital is not created ex nihilo in the fractional reserve lending process. Your capital is existing dollars, right? You're not making money in the fractional reserve lending process. You have actual existing cash. Is that right? It's in the jump fund.
So the jump fund is basically an investment pool. Folks commit to us, and as we find investment opportunities, we call their capital and we say, hey, you told us you would commit $50,000, and now we need 10% of that. We're ready. And so we're not sitting on a pool of money. We basically get commitments on the front side and then ask for that commitment portion as the business opportunity surfaces.
Say something, Stephanie Crowe, about patient lending. Local economy, I think, in the future is going to rely more and more on people who don't need to have the immediate payout. They need to be, the investor needs to understand that if he's investing, let's say, in a local bike shop, that there's not going to be an immediate return. He can't, once he puts the money in, it's kind of locked away. He can't get it out.
Yes.
So he has to be patient in understanding that he can't sell with a phone call and get the money in his account the next 2 days later.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
Right.
So he has to be patient in obtaining liquidity again, and also in the reward, which would be the profit. Now that your investors are patient investors.
So David, I love this because I fell into angel 20 years after basically trust, investment, and wealth experience. And what I saw over the course of my career was really successful business operators who were able to accrue millions of dollars, sometimes selling their companies. They didn't just take their money and move to an island and buy a fancy, a yacht. I mean, what I found was that
they didn't consume the money. They had more plans.
And so some of my very best clients took time then to get behind the next generation. And so I started facilitating deals with young, talented, energetic, hardworking individuals that had some kind of backing of a key man or woman who was able to lend not just their business advice, but actually, guarantee a loan or actually become a partial investor. And Chattanooga has that spirit. I'd say, my friends at Lamppost are very much that way. They didn't just build a great company and have their own fun exit. They're turning around to help other people realize their dreams. And I feel like that's the Chattanooga way.
Well, say something about this question. My question, I still have the feeling that my answer hasn't come to me about patient. What is patience required in local centric investing?
Yeah.
And I would like to suggest that part of the answer would include or should include the claim of geography upon the individual, because you're here and the party in whom you're investing is here. It's not purely a financial relationship anymore. Right. There is a social connection. There's a cultural connection.
Yes.
And I'm answering your question. These are the means by which you can be patient. In other words, it's not just money anymore, in which you have a right to be impatient and demand the money back.
Right.
But because it's local, you are willing to wait, and there's a kind of communitarianism. Well, I guess that's kind of what I'm asking about.
I love that.
Where does that patience come from, other than that thing I'm mentioning?
Well,
which is,
okay, so
maybe it's not true.
No, that patience comes from not needing money. Like a retiree that's living on a fixed income that just needs a certain amount of money in their bank account every month. It probably needs to have a fair amount of bonds and maybe a little bit involved in equities. But the folks that are that need consistent cash flows and don't have reserves of liquidity to fall back upon if hard times hit, those people probably shouldn't play in this space. So where we're talking about patient capital is people that have an expense profile, and income and liquidity reserves that far exceed their lifestyle. And so these are folks that say, okay, it only takes me X to live, and I've got this reserve, and I've got this reserve to get behind some special projects with people that I believe in. And patient capital, I think everybody goes into a transaction saying, we're patient investors, until they're not. And so it's easy to be a patient investor, but times change, opportunities change, crises hit, and then that's really where the rubber hits the road. Like, is this an investor group that really has the wherewithal to be patient if something happens in their own management and their own practice, and they need the money, things can get difficult quickly. So I would say to an entrepreneur, your investor group is very much a marriage. It's a marriage and a partnership. So know who's investing in you. It's got to work.
This is David Tulis, and we're talking with Stephanie Crowe, and we're asking about patient capital. We need more of that. And my general theme on the David Tulis Show here at the radio is divesting nationally and investing locally. Find local people who need capital. There are many worthy people. Some you would never expect are entrepreneurs, and they are. Find out who they are. I've got some important messages now, and I'd like you to stay tuned. We'll be right back. We've got more.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
If you've suffered a personal injury or a loved one was the victim of a